We're beaming back in for another episode. Welcome back to the Hit or Miss Star Trek podcast. I am your usual host, Mike Wilson, General of the Klingon Empire. No, not really. But this is the continuation of our Klingon-themed series. So we will be looking at a very important Klingon-themed episode later on, that being the Enterprise two-parter, Affliction and Divergence. We'll get into that later, don't worry about that, but we have bits and pieces beforehand. First of all, I have to introduce the people here with me. So first, my co-host, DK, welcome.
Hello.
How's it going? Are you feeling all right?
Yeah, I'm not too bad. Ready to get this this show on the road.
Awesome. And DK just did his first solo work for our other podcast. So if you haven't yet checked out our interview with Tom Holland, not that one, the director of Child's Play, Fright Night, the writer of Psycho 2, horror legend, basically, please go and check that out if you've got any interest in horror. We want that to do well because it's a fantastic interview. So DK, I've plugged that up top for you.
Yeah, I appreciate that, mate. We might get one more viewer.
We never know. And we are joined by kind of a returning guest, although this is the first time he's actually done the podcast, I suppose, proper. You'll recognize the voice from our top 10 Starfleet ships and our Trekker Mind series. We're welcomed again by Ken Sweeney from the Comfortable Spot podcast. Welcome back, Ken.
Hi, guys. How are you doing?
I'll resist the urge to say top of the morning to you. So.
Hey, Shawnee.
I know, I upset myself with that one. Anyways. And in comes the Chief O'Brien icon just as I said that. Perfect timing.
Oh, Jesus.
Anyway. So just to quickly go over some stuff, the podcast breaks down into sections if you're new or you're unfamiliar, where we basically start by doing a little get to know you with our guest. Then we would jump into normally the hit or miss section, which will be a little bit different this week, but I'll explain later. Then we jump into the review of the episodes in question, hear from the audience what they thought about it, and then give our conclusions on our scores out of 5, and briefly touch on, before that, our favorite character moment and line. So, without any further ado, then the first thing we do, because, Ken, we haven't had you in before for an actual full-on proper podcast episode, we haven't really had a chance to break down the introduction that we normally do with everybody.
Hey.
So I'm going to do the shining the light in your face Cardassian style situation. It's really not that bad. In the section that I geekily call Hailing Frequencies Open.
Hailing frequencies open, sir.
So there we go. There we go. So Ken, welcome back to the podcast. We know a little bit about you from, well, a fair bit from our conversations in the other 2 episodes, even though they weren't specifically geared towards that. So we do know that you are a fan of Enterprise, which is quite fitting for this week's review. Particularly, you're a fan of Captain Archer, it seems. Yeah. Not as much of a fan of some of the newer Trek stuff. And yeah, a huge fan of Chief O'Brien, your countryman, it seems.
Flying the flag, yeah. But before that, what's your man's name that used to be in the Star Trek? He was say, Take Me Home Again, Kathleen. What was his name, the guy in the original episodes? I can't think of it. Moriarty or something, wasn't it? Or
what was his name, actually? Finnegan or something, was it?
Oh,
no, that was...
It was a real, Darby O'Gill name.
Riley.
You know.
It was Riley, wasn't it? Yeah. Lieutenant Kevin Riley, the guy who was like, free ice cream for everyone.
Yeah. I was like, God. Yeah. At least we don't have. At least the Russians had to wear a wig, so at least he didn't have to wear a wig, so that was good.
Oh my word! Can you imagine just giving him like a red wig?
Yeah, Jesus, bloody hell. Anyway, yeah. So that's me. Yeah, so, I'm a big fan of Captain Archer. Yeah. I think about him a lot during the day. I think about him a lot, and I think about he's getting so old. So who would we get to replace him if they ever decided to have a movie or something? And I was thinking. It's so hard to replace, It's just that grit that came, as if it just came in on a horse after riding with Clint Eastwood, It's just hard. On here,
I think we'd probably just resort to doing it animated, and then we just need his voice.
I thought of Aaron Eckhart actually from Battle of LA. He might be, he could come close. He's kind of got the Haggerty look, hasn't he? Handsome.
He's no Sam Beckett though. Let's be fair.
No, but he's close enough. He's like maybe he's the right age as well. He's about pushing 50 now, so it'll be perfect. But you can dream. I can dream. Everyone can dream.
We'll leave you to dream about that one. But yeah, I do have a few questions to ask you that we've asked every guest. So the first one would be, what is it that first got you into Star Trek? Can you remember your first experience, your exposure to it, maybe your first episode, and what was it that grabbed you about it that made you want to carry on watching?
Kind of a slow burner. My father used to watch it a lot. he was very much in Star Trek because he liked the storylines behind it. I remember very early on when I was in Dublin, and the house, we had 7 in our house, so television was at a premium, real premium. So, I used to get him when my father would have complete control. He was master controller, So when he watched the TV, I kind of got a chance to sit down and watch it with him. So I remember first episode, I remember 2 episodes originally from Star Trek, the original series. Was there one about the first Federation, and it turned out to be this very strange looking kid? That was
the Corbomite maneuver, I believe.
Yeah. That was a good one. And then I can't think of the name, but I remember there was another one that struck out to me where there was 2 guys on the ship and one black, the white and black faces, and it was all about racial, and it was very good.
Yeah.
And my father kind of explained that to me a lot. So that was that got me into it. And then I kind of went to see the film, the original movie, and I found it extremely boring because I'd only seen Star Wars.
You have sense.
Yeah. It was a bit too much for me being like kind of 10, at the time.
Yeah.
But I did appreciate the idea of all the models. And so that kind of got more into that. And then again, Next Generation was a slow burner because I was kind of abroad. I was working and stuff like that. And I was no time for Star Trek, only time for girls and drink. So I when I got back to Ireland in the late 90s, I was kind of watching Star Trek at home then. And Sky was on at the time. Sky Channel. It wasn't like what we have now where it's this big behemoth. It was just like one Sky. And I think on Fridays or something and Sundays, they'd show a Star Trek episode. But then they did a great thing. They showed all the Star Trek Next Generation series every day at 6 o'clock.
This was my exact exposure. It was 5 o'clock. For us, obviously.
Yeah. So I used to come home from work, sit down and spend that 1 hour just watching and catching up on the Next Generation. And by then, kind of the movies had come out. So I was dating this girl. She was into science fiction as well. And I do want to see Generations, and I thought that was great. I enjoyed it because I love Malcolm McDowell as an actor. I think he was really cool. And from there on in, I just kind of started watching all the series as they came along. And I was always I used to read a lot about Star Trek. I'd read the books, of the previous past and the history of this kind of control, divergence and all these things that were happening in the beginning of history. And that's why I like First Contact a lot, because it kind of explored that. And that's when Enterprise came in around 2000. I was working in a big, huge office place, big multinational place. And there was kind of a Star Trek group there. I joined that. Oh, okay. And, that we watched Enterprise a lot then. And we used to just chat about it a lot. So I kind of see Enterprise as kind of a bit like, they're like Portsmouth or something in the football. You have to follow the underdog a little bit, and sometimes they turn into a Leicester. So, that was where I got into Enterprise. And to this day, 90, I think there was 92 episodes or something was in Enterprise. It was amazing, really, because nowadays for the shtick that it got and for the abuse that it got, even though there wasn't much of it online, it was very primitive at the time. It stayed for 4 seasons, and we got a massive amount of episodes. Because when you look at Discovery, I think Discovery's it's heading for the chop now. I don't think they've even come close to that amount of episodes.
No. We talked about that when they announced the cancellation, because we were like, it's very misleading to see it got 5 seasons, which would sound like, oh, that's pretty good.
No, I want to play episodes. I'm like you. So when I look at Enterprise, I kind of go, it got over 90 episodes. That's a good run for any TV station.
I think it got 98 episodes, which is so frustrating, because if they'd gotten another 2 to get to 100, how hard would that have been, man?
I know. But apparently the money ran out, even after the one about the augments. So so and again, I'm kind of I that's how Star Trek. So to sum it up, that's my road in Star Trek. Now I'm married with kids, so it's weird with competing with your children. Because they don't understand or care about about Star Trek. They just care about Star Wars, Marvel, and all the TV shows that are out now at the moment, and all those cartoons and stuff. So it's really difficult for kids, and I think Star Trek is becoming more nowadays just for kind of older people. I think it's just kind of the establishment now. So
we'll talk about that later. Yeah,
we're very lucky in that we get that. Because although. I'm not a fan of Discovery. I still watched every episode because I felt that I had to do that, because I can't be a critic of it and not watch it. But I really love the last series of Picard, and I really love Strange New Worlds. So, the fact that we're getting this, I think we're very lucky.
Yeah. As I say, I will talk about it because there was a Star Trek show that was specifically geared at kids that was a fantastic gateway in for them. Mm-hmm. But apparently, Paramount decided it would be better to make it a tax write-off and get rid of it forever. So... yeah, we'll talk about that later. This will come up.
Next question.
It's on my mind.
You ran out of time.
No. The next question would be, if you had to pick 3 episodes or movies to show someone that you think represents the best of the Trek franchise, what would they be and maybe why?
That's a great question. And I think the first one I'd probably say is First Contact, because it actually helps to explain the history and the universe of Star Trek. And it doesn't have much of a backstory either about the characters, so you don't really need to know much about them. Like if you didn't know anything about, let's say, Deep Space Nine, it wouldn't matter whether, Worf was originally in the Enterprise. He could have been just a mate. You know what I mean? For all you know. So like, this is the way it was, just really well written. And the acting in it was really good as well. I thought that was very, very good. So that'd be the first one I'd say. And then the Borg, the one I can't think of it, you'll have to help me. The first series, the 2-parter, where they originally came across the Borg.
Well, the first one was a 1-parter. It was Q-Who.
Yeah, that's right. But the actual 2-parter one,
Best of Both Worlds.
Sorry, yes, you're right, guys. Sorry about that. I should have known that. I showed that to an ex-girlfriend one time who had no idea about Star Trek, and we had it on video, So I had it on the first video cassette, and then it just ended where he went fire, Yes, and she went, "Oh, what's going on? Turn it on. Wait, where's the next bit?" And I knew she was hooked then. And she hated Star Trek and Star Wars and all that stuff, but she really liked that. So that would be Best of Both Worlds, the 2 parts. Yeah. And then the last one, I suppose, I like Enterprise. So I'd probably think about showing maybe the Enterprise series, where the 4th series, and probably Divergence and Affliction were good, but I think I'm throwing on this one. I'm gonna have to think. The Augments was good. I like that. That was a good episode. It was also, I think it was directed by LeVar Burton as well. So that's really good. So that would be the 3 I'd show. Yeah.
So that would be what? Borderland, Cold Station 12, and the Augments, that like 3-part
story.
Yeah,
that kind of, the Augments is a really good episode, So if you probably have to show the other 2. But I like the way it was directed, and it was really well put together, I do like Roxanne Dawson's direction in any Star Trek. I think it's really, really good. It shows a side that you don't usually see. But for me, the Augments was a great episode, because again, it harks back. You could show, say, First Contact, and then you could also show, that and say, look, this is kind of a blaze off from it. But I know the Wrath of Khan is great, and I do know that. I will admit that. But that would be kind of something I'd save once everybody, that I've kind of introduced to as an idea of Star Trek.
So the big question then: what's your favorite of all of the Trek series?
Oh, it's Enterprise. Yeah, it's Enterprise. If you ask me this question in 3 years' time, I might just say Strange New Worlds. I always have Enterprise is like, the wife. Strange New Worlds is the mistress. Going to get all French here, or Italian, whatever.
So you're not going to be showing this episode of the wife then?
No, I'm not comparing. No, we're not talking about in a physical sense here, But no, it was just in terms of seasons. Yeah, that was like, I really am liking Strange New Worlds. I love the character development. Yeah, I kind of think they're a bit weird about Dr. Mbenga, but I think it's getting there with him, But the rest they're all spot on. I love the whole gang. I love the fact that he introduced the only one I didn't like about this so far. I know we're going off topic here, but the only one I didn't like so far is that he introduced Kirk, and I don't like the guy playing that role. He's got
I love him.
Nobody whatsoever.
I think he's nailed it personally, but okay. Disagreement, I suppose.
I don't know. I think it would have been brilliant to have, somebody with a bit more. Maybe I'm wrong. I've seen guys do it in kind of fan-made movies, and they seem to come across better. But like I said, they didn't go into it too much, so I was glad about that.
Yeah, I do think Strange New Worlds is another of those situations that you were talking about, though, whereby, 10 episodes a season is kind of pathetic from what we're used to. It's not going to get to 98 episodes because it's not going to run for 10 seasons. Yeah.
Why are you doing that, though? Do you guys know that? I don't know enough about the world of, shows.
All I really heard was that, like, obviously money is the primary thing for everything. And then to try and keep all of the series that are running in line so that they all have 10 episodes, which again is weird because some of them, like Lower Decks, for example, is like a 24-minute or whatever cartoon.
Yeah.
And you're comparing that to like a 50-minute episode of live action television.
Okay.
So it doesn't translate like for like, but they're acting like it does. Like, oh well, we do 10 episodes of the cartoon series, so now we'll do 10 of the live action. And even the last season of Discovery now is going to be 10 episodes because to get it in line with everything else, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense, really. But
because I'm wondering if it's more like, do they think that there's less, patience of the viewer? And that they're like kind of want things to come to an end or, come to a closing much quicker. I don't know. It's just weird. Because, Star Trek for me has always been quite a substantial series of over at least 20 episodes. Yeah. Most Star Trek fans are used to that. And I think it's just strange that they're going kind of down the Netflix road of, everything gets released at once, but it's only 10 episodes. And they're not even releasing everything at once. They're just kind of saying it's 10 episodes.
I think that's the thing, though. The way people watch TV has changed. And I think people, like the people that make these things, think that we think less equals, more quality. Because this is kind of off topic, but relevant. I'm currently listening to the Smallville Rewatch podcast. And they keep going on and on about like, oh, if it was made today, you wouldn't have all of these crap filler episodes that aren't as good because it would be a 10 episode season. But that's the thing. And it's like nowadays we don't do that. Like the people that made Smallville made Wednesday on Netflix. And it's like, that's 8 episodes. And therefore you can't have a dud because 8 solid episodes, fantastic. You're running with it, you go. And it's kind of like... But there's no guarantee that you're going to have 10 fantastic episodes, though, is there?
So recover as well. If you hit a rough spot around episode 5, it's very hard to recover. Yeah, especially if you've already made most of the episodes. And so I just think that to have dull, boring episodes in a series is better than having nothing at all. And I think most fans of most TV shows would accept that. More is better than, people would rather have more than have less good quality episodes, especially if you can't guarantee they're good quality. Like, for example, if you're not taking from a book. So if there's a book and a book is really well established, if you're not taking from that book and you're kind of making it up as you go along, which is the way most TV shows are, then you are going to hit a rough patch. They hit a rough patch with the Obi-Wan thing, and then they couldn't quite recover from that. So they also hit a rough patch with the last the Mandalorian. So I don't know. I think it's a dodgy road to take. At least if you have 20 episodes, you've got time to recover, you've got time to regroup and say, okay, let's just drop the story about your woman having 2 heads and let's move on. It's like, and that's why Strange New World is so popular, probably because it just clicks and ends at the episode, and then we're back to Earth. So
I know we've debated this back and forth all the time, but just to just to bring it up quickly again, I think it also gives you the time, if you have longer seasons, to do things like you said, get to know the background characters and stuff. Like you don't have to have the main cast in every episode so that they can be off double bank and filming somewhere else, and we can get to know some of the the engineer or the helmsman that we've seen a couple of times but don't know much about. Give them a story, Some of the best treks are that. If you look at the Next Gen episode Lower Decks, it's barely got any of the main cast in it, and it's fantastic.
Great episode, and of course inspired the Lower Decks cartoon as well.
Exactly, So anyway, so the last of the questions for you, because I think DK has probably fallen asleep over there.
No, I'm loving listening to this. This is fascinating to me.
Awesome. The last question is obviously going to be relevant to the fact that we're doing Klingon-themed stories, and it is just: do you have any of your personal favorites that are Klingon stories? And how many do you have? What would you shout out as a good example of that?
Of the whole episode of The Next Generation, where Worf's son is coming into the whole thing, and then he kind of has to deal with parenthood alongside being, your typical, Klingon warrior. And I thought that was a great episode because the kid who played the Alexander was really good actor. He had a lovely manner about him, which was kind of a combination of human and Klingon. And when he kind of went with his Klingon, anger, which I think he did it with Roxana Troy, which was another great episode that he was in as well. Yeah, I love those episodes because that's the thing. I'm sorry, we're harking back to this again, but you wouldn't have had time to actually have really nice in-depth episodes like that if you only had 10 episodes. Yeah. So I think it was great that it developed, because up till then, all you had Worf doing was attacking somebody and getting beaten the crap out of, right? Because there's like memes of it, and there's like clips of every single time Worf's got beaten, and up till that point, he was kind of this kind of punch bag in many respects, and he was always flying off the handle. I recommend photon torpedoes, Captain, and they're up against the, some guy in a horse, and it's like, and it's like, that's the whole thing about Worf. So that by the time it got to that season, I think they really began to develop it. And I like the idea of that. So I love that. That was great because, Klingons up to that point were kind of seen as, monsters in a sense. And they were
Yeah.
always this kind of monster look about them. And that gave them a real, for the want of a better word, a real humanity to them. And I thought that was great, which, by the way, was kind of destroyed by Discovery in immense ways. Because, you know, you saw cannibalism, you saw them eating bodies, you know, people, of humans, which I thought was completely stupid, completely unnecessary, and undid all the work that Worf did, you know, as a character actor in all of the Next Generation and Deep Space Nine, especially Deep Space Nine. And the other Klingon episode I really loved was when he got Kolath and all those lads back together again. They all came back and they fought with Yadzia, and they were fighting the albino. I loved that episode. That was brilliant. You know, they were just great. You know, they were just, you know, they're kind of like real old-fashioned Klingons that we all love.
Yeah, that's been in and out of this series, and in the end, I don't think we're doing it now, and it's probably one of the most glaring omissions of Klingon episodes.
Brilliant episode. Loved it. Yeah, they all got a really good, you know, sending off, and I thought it was great. Yeah, I loved that. That was a good episode. Yeah. Those two really stick out for me, but I do like Alexander. I think they could have probably used the character a bit more. Unfortunately, they didn't. Yeah. But I guess as a parent, looking back on it now, I kind of see it, you know, and it is kind of weird that you just have this life and then suddenly somebody comes along and you kind of go, Jesus, how do I deal with this? You know, so I'm sure
your parents, you can live with them.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people though who work in the military kind of looked at that episode and saw you know, similarities to the way they have to behave and the way their life is kind of controlled in many ways. So yeah, I think again, you see, this is the beauty of it. You know, you can like one episode of The Next Generation, and I can like an episode, and it doesn't really affect the overall outcome of the actual series, which I think happens when you only have a short run of episodes.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's going to handle it for the hailing frequencies open part then. Because I knew we'd always get quite a bit out of you because you're always happy to talk things direct, which is good. Right. So the next thing would normally be the hit or miss section, and I do feel bad because unfortunately we're going to have to forego it this week slightly, which means you won't get your chance to be opinionated about random things. I don't like to get rid of it, but as I kind of alluded to earlier, we have had some big news this week that dropped. And DK and I, at least, are definitely going to want to address this and talk about it. So, apologies. It's probably going to be a bit old news by the time this episode goes out, but it's only been a day or two since it was announced at time of recording. And it is the news about Star Trek Prodigy. I don't know if you've heard about this, Ken. If not, it may just be me and DK ranting. But,
I haven't watched the series, but I know what you're going to talk about. So, yeah. Look, you know, you guys know more about it than I do, so fire away.
Well, just to give you the background, if you don't know, I don't imagine anybody that's listening to this wouldn't know, but basically, not only have Paramount announced out of nowhere, after previously announcing that season 2 of Prodigy would go ahead and would be airing later this year, they've now decided they're cancelling the show, and not only are they cancelling it, but the existing 20 episodes of season 1 are being completely pulled from Paramount Plus and won't exist at all. It's an ongoing trend that keeps on happening to try and do, you know, tax saving or whatever business kind of thing that supposedly makes sense. And it sucks. Basically, it's terrible, and we'll get into probably all of the reasons why we believe that. But yeah, suffice to say, it's not great. I mean, cancelling a show is terrible to start with. They have said on the plus side that they're going to allow the team to finish the production of season 2 and then shop the show around to other places to see if they may want to, you know, buy it and show it, because you will have at least one unaired full season that way, and then obviously the first season as well. Unfortunately, the first season is only available in half form to buy physically as well, which thankfully I do have, because they only released the first 10 episodes, so they've never had a physical release for the second half of even season 1, which again means that even of the 20 episodes that do exist and have aired, 10 of them will just cease to exist in, I think, 5 more days on Paramount Plus, which again, people are kicking off because this is Paramount Plus, the home of Star Trek. Find all your Star Trek in one place, except this one, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but yeah. And DK, I will throw it over to you because we've been here before. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's, I don't know, for a time after our last kind of panic-inducing episode when Discovery was cancelled, I thought maybe that we got the wrong end of the stick and Paramount was going to treat the series with a bit more respect. But this isn't it. This isn't the way to go about it. Not only is it kind of disrespectful to the fans, but it's incredibly disrespectful to everybody that's worked on this series. And I'm not just singling Paramount out here. I mean, you know, you had the same thing with Max when it did Batgirl and Infinity Train, Scooby-Doo. Disney's had its fair share with, you know, Willow, Runaways, Mysterious Benedict Society. And, you know, the streaming services, they were supposedly going to put an end to all this kind of thing. You were supposed to have everything that you wanted there at your fingertips, and it was going to make everything so much easier. All this, to me, is doing is encouraging piracy, because that, at this point, is going to be the only way anybody gets to see these episodes. And I feel really bad for all the creative people that have worked on these shows, because it's not like you can even list it on your resume, for want of a better word. Because if you go to a studio and say, oh, I worked on this show, for all intents and purposes, no longer exists. And it's fine for Paramount to say, yes, we're going to shop it around to someone else. But supposing no one else takes it up, and how far does that stretch? Does Paramount say, yeah, you can broadcast it, but we have the rights to release it on Blu-ray, but it's a tax write-off for us, so we're never going to release it on Blu-ray? Where does the consumer stand with regards to this?
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I mean, to give the audience a little bit of background, and again, if there are some of you out there, they're moaning again, because we've been over this before. We had a full episode dealing with the Paramount Plus debacle when they didn't launch in the UK, and then they took Discovery off Netflix to put on Paramount Plus that we couldn't get access to, and in the end, they had to resort to putting it on Pluto TV so that we had some way to watch it. That was farcical enough to start with. Then, of course, there was the cancellation of Discovery, which we weren't happy about. But, at the end of the day, shows get cancelled. And even though they're shorter seasons, it ran for 5 seasons. It's had a lot of years since 2017, and it'll still be there at the end of the day. That's the plus side. If this was just, we're going to air season 2 of Prodigy and it's cancelled, it would suck. I'd hate it. But at least those 2 seasons are still there, and those fantastic episodes are still there to watch and still exist. And we might hopefully get a release that we can physically buy and own. But now that's, looking unlikely. Hopefully the whole physical release thing isn't as unlikely, but like you said, the issue more is, well, your streaming service is supposed to be the home. And like you said, like, everybody's been doing this. So to give you the background, it started with David Zaslav at Warner Brothers, who took over and decided we need to make so many millions in tax, so we're not going to release Batgirl because it just isn't good enough and it'll lose us money. A move which has spectacularly backfired, as it seems, because The Flash looks like it's currently on course to be the worst performing superhero movie of all time. So kudos for that decision. You scrapped the one that probably would have made you money and released the one that's going to kill you as a studio. But, we're not here to criticize DC. We do that on the other podcast. So, yeah, I mean, he started it with all that. And then, as you say, the streaming services got in on the act, and Disney in particular were like, there's a laundry list of shows that we're just removing from Disney Plus. And some of them were big shows. I mean, like Willow, I'm not a fan, but it's a big show. It's well known. But at the end of the day, it's not their flagship properties.
No, I'll be honest. I started watching Willow and it wasn't captivating me, so I've not gone back to it. But there were fans of it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, all of the other shows you mentioned, I mean, there's going to be fans of it. Somebody would have liked it. And as you said, the idea that, and again, it sucks to keep on going on and on about this, but the idea of this corporate capitalist stupid idea of, yeah, you've made it and it was out there, but now it's better for us if we just pretend it doesn't exist and then we can claim your tax money back or whatever else. It's so offensive. And I know, it's show business. It's not always about art and whatever else, but it's just so counterintuitive to your audience, to the people that are making stuff for you. It's just so dumb. It doesn't seem like.
I think it's endemic in the system at the moment. I mean, it's not going to notice that this is happening at the same time that there's the writers' strike going on because the writers are being treated like crap. I mean, I was reading a thing earlier about the working conditions on the last animated Spider-Man movie that saw all these people leave. The Hollywood studios at the minute are just seeming to be treating their best and brightest as if they're part-time shift workers at McDonald's on a Saturday. And that it's not going to save them money in the long run. But yet you seem to have these studios, and I don't know any of these people personally, but I wouldn't trust them as far as I could throw them. And what annoys me more than anything is I've been joining you on this show now for 2 years, right? The very first episode that we recorded together was the discussion of them removing Discovery from Netflix because of the whole Paramount Plus debacle and it ending up on Pluto. And in those 2 years, There has been no improvement. It's just been disaster after disaster. You had that. You had the problem with Discovery. You had the problem with Paramount clamping down on the cons over in Europe.
Yeah.
I don't get what their focus is.
Well,
even on
a smaller level, I mean, you've talked about it and we joke about it, but even on a smaller level, not understanding your audience to the point that they had that whole campaign about the starship has landed, which was just, it's corporate bullshit from people that have never watched a Trek episode in their life. You know, ships don't land mostly. I'm fair enough one or two.
you could have just not done this tax write-off with Prodigy and just not spent that absurd amount of money. And I guarantee it will have been an absurd amount of money on something that was completely irrelevant to promote the franchise. It just beggars belief sometimes.
Yeah, and I will say, like I said,
actually for a second there, I just want to I think what DK said is perfect. I think the biggest problem that something like this does is that it just makes everybody just do a runner towards pirate watching, and it kills off loyalty for a start. That's the big issue. And I think the problem with the Star Trek franchise is that it doesn't have a Kevin Feige there. It doesn't have somebody who is a godfather who has kind of looked at what Star Trek is, what it needs, and what it should be. I mean, even, we were supposed to have had Gene Roddenberry, but Roddenberry was well gone by the time Star Trek really kind of entrenched itself in pop culture. So I think what it needs is somebody to just grab a hold of the actual franchise and just kind of say, well, look, clean off what's not making it, but clean it off properly. Don't just cut it and do this sort of, as you said, an injustice towards people who have invested time and invested money as well. I think a lot of people have kind of went out, bought Blu-ray DVDs for the first part, and then obviously signed up, and have their kids watching this sort of thing. There's 100 reasons why they cancelled it, but they should always try and be honest with the fans.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. It's not even, first of all, to slightly counter you, I do think we kind of have that in that this is not an anti-Kurtzman rant because this isn't a creative thing. This is the corporate side of things. So it's got nothing to do with the people that make any of the shows. It's not their decisions or anything. It is literally, the VP of Paramount and whoever, corporately owns, I forget. I don't know. I don't keep up with these things, which friggin' conglomerate currently merged with the Paramount and CBS or whatever. So it's the decision from them that's just like, we need a tax write-off. This isn't doing viewers for whatever reason, so scrap it completely. And it's just so dumb, not least because, like I said, I don't understand where the logic is. Like, because we can't see metric of like who's watching what on streaming and whatever else, we don't know what they want from this show. But since announcing the cancellation and the kind of disgusting it's being removed forever, the Blu-ray and DVD of season 1, part 1 has sold out everywhere in 2 days.
Yeah.
It's not, you can't get it because everybody immediately was like, well, shit, I want to own what I can if you're going to get rid of it completely. So clearly there is an audience there, which suggests to me that the failure wasn't the show, it was your marketing. Because as soon as people thought, oh, there's something I can't get, but I might want to watch it sometime.
Well, I mean, we had this discussion earlier today that I was looking up, trying to get hold of a copy, and you found a copy online that wasn't a legit copy because it had the entire series. Now, I, decided not to do it because I'd rather own a legit copy. But there's going to be many people out there who don't have as many qualms as I do, who are just going to jump at that, especially now if it seems, as much as they're wanting a release of the second 10 episodes, there's no guarantee that they're going to get one.
Yeah. I will say that the plus side of that kind of is now that like one of the creatives that we've kind of talked to online, Aaron Walke was the one that posted about, I've confirmed it's all sold out everywhere and keep going because the more you sell of these kinds of things, the more chance there is that you get that second half released and the more chance there is that somebody picks up the show and he used the example that I'll kind of copy here and say Futurama has been saved like 3 times now just because the DVD sales are astonishing. So even though it gets cancelled, it's off air for a few years, then some other network picks it up because they're like, crap, people are watching this still.
But it's like you said, you can understand a show gets cancelled. Shows get cancelled all the time. It's the erasure of what is there. That's what is
especially when it is so good because, and again, I'm probably not going to convince anybody to watch it that hasn't decided to watch it by now. But we've said it before, and I'm not exaggerating. This is not just me saying, talking out of my butt or whatever. it is by far the best current Star Trek show that was currently on the air. It's the one that I'd be most gutted to lose, and I'm most gutted to lose because it is I know everyone's raving about Picard season 3. Fair play, have at you, love it. You can stick your Picard season 3 for me. I'd care much less about losing that than I do about losing this first season of Prodigy. It's that good. There are people that didn't like the new stuff that are saying it's the only thing that's got a right to call itself the Star Trek name. I don't agree with that line of thinking. I don't want to compete it against other things, but I think it's very telling that people are saying that. And on top of being that level of Star Trek, that it moved us. I mean, we have a review that I'll link to the episode Time and Mock, where we both rated it 5 out of 5. We were moved to almost tears. You've got to get past the fact, and I'm guilty of it as well. I took one look at the opening promotion for it and was like, this looks like a generic Nickelodeon kids show. I don't like the animation style because of it and whatnot, and it's going to be terrible. And then I watched the show and was like, shut me up. This is fantastic. This is Trek from people that understand Trek, that are writing Trek stories, and they're doing it in a way that adults are able to sit down with their kids and introduce them to Star Trek. And the number of people on social media that came out and said, this is even more disgusting because it's the only Trek show that I sit and watch with my kids, or it's the show that got my kids interested in science, or it's the show that got my kids asking, ooh, what is that Star Trek thing that you always watch, Mummy and Daddy? Can we watch more of it with you because we like this? So not only are you getting rid of a show that's, popular and a lot of people care about, you're also literally cutting off a way into the franchise.
Yeah, it's baffling to me because I know I've broadcast that Disney's done the same thing, but when it comes to its big sellers, like something like Star Wars, it's going the opposite way with that franchise. It's introducing this, this young Jedi thing. You would have thought that someone at Paramount, higher up, would have the common sense to say, this is actually a gateway into the show. This is how we retain fans. But it's one of these corporate decisions that just leave me baffled.
Yeah,
I would put it alongside. I mean, I never got into Clone Wars at the start. The three prequels kind of put me off anything to do with Star Wars for a while. But when Rebels came along, I really got into that. And that, just like Prodigy, was marketed at a lower age range. But they did so well that they're now basing a live-action series on continuing the storyline they brought up in that cartoon. So I
love the Clone Wars. Like my 10-year-old loves it. There are like so many episodes that I just actually don't have time to watch them, right? But she just loves them, mostly because they start like Star Trek. They end, and when the episode ends, that storyline ends. So it doesn't require a huge amount of commitment. Yeah. And that's what she likes as well. Now, there are stuff out there, as you said, there's Rebels and all that, and then there's the new stuff that's coming out with the shorts that are designed by other, animation companies and so on. But we haven't even got around to watch them because there's so much of it. But with Star Trek, they kind of had a head start because they didn't have 10 or 15 TV shows or cartoon shows that were competing with it. So it's very strange that they just didn't invest in it. But we see this a lot, don't we? I mean, when I watch Netflix, when I see something on Netflix and I know it's like 2 or 3 years old, and I see season 1 and season 2, I go and check to see if it's cancelled before I invest all those hours. Yeah. And that's bad for TV then. That's bad for TV.
Yeah, not to spend too long on this, but that was another point I was going to bring up, is that doing this is also going to completely F up the franchise, because now they're trying to launch... Fair enough, they've got this whole Section 31 TV movie. That's a whole other thing. We're not going to address that. But they're trying to launch this Starfleet Academy show. Why should I watch that now if there's every chance that it's going to get one season, then you're going to remove it from existence?
Yeah, like Ken was saying, I've done this so many times with Netflix. They've cancelled so many shows. You get invested in the characters, you get invested in the storylines, and they just cancel it. Nowadays, like Ken, when someone rants, or I get a friend that recommends a show on Netflix, the first thing I do is go and see if it's still running or if it's got a complete storyline, because half of the time it's not even worth bothering with.
Yeah, 100%. I will say though, I mean, at least in that situation, what's already been made is still there. And in the case of Prodigy, I mean, if Prodigy season 1 was going to be all there was, even though they are finishing making season 2, let's say for argument's sake, they decided not to carry on with it. Season 2 was going to get ash-canned. It might get released, it might not, but we've got series 1 and those 20 episodes are there. Those 20 episodes are a perfect story. They even ended it at a point where you can happily be like, I'm happy with that. I love what you did there. That gave me a conclusion where you can go on to the next chapter of the story, but equally, that's a conclusion.
And they're cheaper to make as well than TV shows. So it's not like they're investing a huge amount of money that's being thrown out the door.
that's the other thing, because they like you said, a lot of the writers and people that work on it have said the same thing. Because it's animation, they're also treated worse than the people that make live action and stuff, because they're treated like crap because it's seen as secondary or not as good or whatever else, even though writing wise, it's like I said, I'm not exaggerating, it is the best current show.
It really is.
The Prodigy episodes, if you do sit down and watch them, are clearly people that loved, especially the original series and Voyager. They're people that got the messages of those things. And I don't mean when I say it's proper Trek, that will make a lot of people sort of turn off and be like, oh, so it's, sitting around a table doing diplomatic stuff. No, I don't mean that. It's still action packed and it's great, but it's about heart and it's about finding your place and family. And again, Aaron Walkie posted the writers board for the season on Twitter and was like, we don't normally share the creative process, but this is the board. And it had, these are the questions we're going to address. And the central thing was the theme of season 1, hope is a weapon. And I was like, that's Star Trek in 4 words. You know what I mean? And yet you're just thinking to yourself, nah, just get rid of it. Nobody's watching. They are.
The sad thing is that all the shows that are getting cancelled, it's where the very franchise itself is looking towards the future. Now, Strange New Worlds is great and all, but you are really going back as a prequel. Lower Decks, it's kind of in that Next Generation era. Prodigy was, Picard's finished now. There's who knows where this legacy series is going to be, if at all. And now they've got rid of Prodigy, so it's kind of navel gazing. It's taking Star Trek to a period of navel gazing, and I really don't think it needs to be there.
Yeah, and I will say I would happily take Prodigy over Legacy. I know I'm probably alone on that. A lot of people did love that Picard season 3, but I'm not optimistic that would be great. And it bugs me no end that a lot of people that aren't watching Prodigy don't realize that it is a lot of the stuff they probably want from Star Trek Legacy. If you want to know what happened to like Janeway and Chakotay after Voyager, watch Prodigy. The amount of people that were like, oh, why did Janeway not show up in Picard season 3? It would have been cool for her to have a moment with 7 of 9 and stuff. Because Janeway's doing brilliant stuff twice over on Prodigy. The hologram version and the real version, just because it's animated, it's still Kate Mulgrew, and she's got better writing than 90% of the Voyager episodes. So watch the show, So, yeah. Anyway, I will end this quickly by saying, do watch Prodigy. I probably won't convince you, but do. I'm serious.
While you can.
While you can, do try and watch it if you can. It's probably gone from Paramount Plus by this point. If you can get access to that official episodes 1 to 10 on DVD or Blu-ray, please do. I can't condone piracy. I'm also not going to sit here and say don't do it if it's the only way to watch it. Make of that what you will. But I will share links to the Save Star Trek Prodigy hashtag that's going around. There's a petition and stuff. I genuinely care about this in a way I haven't about anything for a while. I mean, we made the rant video about Discovery being cancelled, and then I moved on after about a week. This really sticks in my craw. This bugs me no end because it's a special show and it means a heck of a lot to me. And yeah, like I said, it would be one thing to say it's cancelled, but we'll release them all and you can have those 20 episodes of beautiful television that will be there. People can even discover them later or whatever. But so yeah, I'm still hopeful that, like some of the people behind the show are saying, it's not the end. We're shopping it around. It could still happen. Hope is the theme of the show, so we're doing our best. We're not going to give up. And yeah, hopefully we're going to get that second half of the season released because everything's selling out. Hopefully some place will see the loyalty that it's got and buy it, whether it be Netflix or...
I'd be interested to know what those at Nickelodeon are thinking about all this.
Well, they didn't want it. That's the thing. People are saying, well, you're doomed because Paramount Plus and Nickelodeon, who make the show, both don't want it. Don't want the expense of making it and don't want it. And it's kind of like, well, all right, you say that, but at the end of the day, what you have is a situation where they're paying to finish season 2. So you're going to have 40 episodes, 2 seasons, that there's a very strong audience for, that you don't have to pay any production costs for. You just put on your service, and you'd be a hero to the most rabid, loyal fan base as proven for the last 60 odd years in the universe, So you've got to think somebody would be smart enough to snap it up and see that. And if nothing else, like I said, people are voting with their wallets. They are buying out the things that do currently exist. And yeah, hopefully good news will be coming. I'll keep you updated if and when we hear anything. In the meantime, please watch it if you haven't. Please do support the campaigns. Trust me, there's some fantastic stuff. If you have a way to find those first 10. I've said this to people that didn't want to watch the show, but you can skip straight to the episode we reviewed, Timer Mock, which I'll also link in the description. It's episode 8 of the show, but you don't really need, backstory or whatever or such. And it's a top 5. It's arguably a top 3 episode of the entire franchise, along with another episode which won't exist after a few days, which was called All the World's a Stage, which was in the second batch of episodes that was released, which I really hope doesn't disappear from existence, because I also equally love that, and it's another top 5 Trek. But yeah, do watch Prodigy if you haven't. If you're put off by the look of it, trust me, just give it a go, stick with it, and let's help to save another Trek show from cancellation, because after all, ever since 1969, it is what we bloody do. So, and relax. Any final thoughts from either of you on that then, now that I've ranted?
No, I think we've pretty much covered it. Paramount on notice.
Yeah, just one more thing, if I can just say, I don't think a European based streaming service or any production company is going to take it over. So, as you said, when Netflix is Netflix has kind of got a lot of stuff going on, I don't see them taking it either. Maybe somebody like Amazon will pull it in.
Well,
so,
Amazon is a good shout.
They did it with the the Expanse. So anything's possible.
Well, Amazon also they did have the rights exclusively, and then when Paramount Plus launched, they now have the core rights to Picard, which is still on there, but obviously that's finished, and Lower Decks. So there's a chance Amazon might, if they have any sense, pick it up and be like, well, not only is this a Trek series, but it's the exclusive home of this one. So
do that as well. I mean, they'd spend more money in the toilet rolls than they would, putting that back on thing, So
precisely. I mean, anyway, but so hopefully we'll see what comes of that, but do check out the description for any more information, and we'll move on from that back to our regularly scheduled programming, our traditional podcast. So we'll quickly bring the mood back up and say that we are going to begin our analysis of these episodes. So, as I mentioned, these episodes, Affliction and Divergence, an annoying 2-part story with 2 different titles, as occasionally happens and then sometimes doesn't, even within the same season. I know this season 4 has like In a Mirror Darkly parts 1 and 2, and then it has episodes like this that are like clearly a 2-parter but different titles. Anyway, different nitpick, cue the Joel gif. So, but with that in mind, I normally go into a little bit of behind the scenes information, if you don't mind, before we start reviewing the episode. Before I do that, though, because I have been ranting for quite a while, so to give you guys a chance to jump in first, do you have any initial spoiler-free thoughts on this episode, or thoughts that you had before it aired or going into it?
I just thought it was a great episode for bringing in stuff that we know about that exists in the universe and confirming it within this timeline. And then also, introducing some cool acting and some really poor acting, which I'll talk about later.
Fair enough. What about you, DK?
I kind of see it as there.
Oh, that's a shame. Okay. Well, we're going to have a range of views potentially then, but I'll jump into the behind the scenes because I have something very interesting this week, because I sometimes go to various sources, but one of them that I go to is Memory Alpha to find out what's been said about the episodes, not so much for information, but just to see critical response and the like. And one of the members of Memory Alpha is the writer Michael Sussman, who actually wrote the episode teleplay for Affliction and was on the Enterprise writing staff. So this information comes directly from him. Suffice to say, this is all straight from the horse's mouth when I tell you that this storyline seen in these episodes was intended to explain, obviously, why the original series Klingons had a more human appearance and later Klingons did not. Excuse me. The writers also hoped that the 2-parter would shed some light on the change in the Klingons' temperament and disposition between the original series and Next Generation eras, which DK and I did briefly talk about during our Errand of Mercy review. So, for years, unofficial explanations had appeared in Trek literature to explain the difference between the Klingons from the 60s series and those in later productions. The idea of genetic engineering was explored heavily in several publications licensed by Paramount Pictures, among them FASA's Star Trek The Role-Playing Game, several Pocket Books novels, such as Rules of Engagement, and the reference book The Worlds of the Federation by author Shane Johnson. These works indicated that the Klingons, in inverted commas, encountered during the original series era were Klingon-human fusions, quote, intentionally created to make infiltration into Federation space easier. The true nature of Klingons was revealed during the emergency transmission of the IKS AMAR, as depicted at the start of Star Trek The Motion Picture, and that caused the Federation to radically reevaluate its assessment of the Klingons' scientific capabilities. Whew. In addition to the fusion explanation, the producers of Star Trek Enterprise had heard many pitches over the years for ultimately never produced stories aimed at explaining the change in the Klingon appearance. Additional theories included that the Klingons seen during the original series were from another race than those of later eras, and also that some sort of disease was to blame. The Enterprise writing staff mirrored the fan community, oh boy, in that some felt it might be fun to account for the change, and others thought it was probably best to ignore the entire situation. The topic came up again when the writer Manny Koto was named showrunner during the series' 4th season. At first, the producers were only interested in a story with one or more ridgeless Klingons who'd infiltrated Starfleet for the purpose of intelligence gathering. It was thought the story might involve a surgically altered Klingon operative aboard Enterprise, someone like Arn Darwin a century later. Around this time, the writing staff had recently concluded the 3-part augment crisis arc that we addressed earlier. It occurred to them that some of the genetically engineered embryos might have survived the destruction of the bird of prey, and that the Klingons might use these embryos to bioengineer their own version of Klingon supermen. This seemed to be a way into a story dealing with the origin of human-like Klingons. More to the point, the Enterprise producers thought it was simply too cool of an idea to reveal that Kang, Koloth Kor, and other original series Klingons may have had the DNA of Khan inside them. While some fans clamoured for an explanation for the smooth forehead Klingons, Michael Sussman himself hoped to do more, account for the apparent change in Klingon culture between the 23rd and 24th centuries. As depicted in the first Trek series, Klingons were notoriously savage, crafty, and at times cowardly, putting this characterization at odds with the more noble, honourable Klingons that are seen in Next Gen. The minor neural reordering noted by Phlox in this episode was intended to suggest that the augmented Klingons were not only cursed with a more human appearance, but they also inherited many human weaknesses as well. In the episode Divergence, the female Lyneth, newly infected by the augment virus, claimed that she, quote, felt fear for the first time since I was a child. Her fellow augmented warriors had become like humans, weak, cowardly. The Enterprise writer's explanation for the change in the Klingons did not, and could not, satisfy every Trek fan. Gene Roddenberry himself reportedly believed any explanation was unnecessary. The makeup seen in the films and later series would have been too expensive during the 60s. Roddenberry felt it best to simply imagine that Klingons always had ridges, although this preference was officially contradicted by canon when the change was noted by the DS9 crew in Trials and Tribulations, as we know. So, now that you guys have heard all of that intensive amount of information from the writer or the co-writer of one of the episodes, any thoughts on that now?
I thought it was a good idea. As they said, it was too cool to lose. But I think in terms of, having to do it, that was unnecessary. I mean, most people can just suspend disbelief on it, when it comes to stuff like this, because it's a little bit like, you're looking at the bridge of the Enterprise in Strange New Worlds, and then you look at the bridge that Scotty had in The Next Generation, and you kind of go, what's going on here? So,
yeah, we're Trek fans. A lot of people can't hand wave things away that look different.
Yeah, well, you see, this is the thing. I've kind of said this before. Star Trek has done a very poor job when you compare it, say, to Star Wars, because Star Wars didn't go into too much detail in what's in front of them when they're flying a ship. So, they kind of stood up the test of time a little bit, particularly uniforms and dress senses kind of stood the test of time, where Star Trek hasn't done so well. So it's a little bit of a battle that they have to have all the time. I mean, even when you look back, say, on the Discovery thing where they tried to really develop the Klingon look, it just backfired on them. So I think that leave Best alone is probably a good idea. But I do like this episode for a lot of other reasons, though, so we can probably go into that later.
It is weird, and it's worth mentioning that we can now sort of address, apologies to DK if this is a slight spoiler, but we know that Strange New Worlds has completely went back to, weirdly, the kind of Next Generation Klingon design, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense because it's a sequel to Discovery and a prequel to the original series, neither of which use that makeup. So you've corrected it and created another problem, which seems like an odd choice, but okay. I don't mind. It looks fine, and I'm one of the few people that can actually sort of, I care about visual canon. I'm a nerd for ships, and I like knowing where everything is and stuff, but at the same time, like you kind of were hinting at there, Ken, I can look at Strange New Worlds and think, yeah, it's the same Enterprise, it just looks different, whatever, it's clearly the same thing. And I know there are some sources, including, much as I love, the people that run it, Exastra Scientia, the Starship database, that are so vehemently anti the new stuff that they're like, it has to be a reboot because visually there's no way to reconcile it with canon. And I'm just kind of like, well, there is. It's called imagination. Get over it. You know what I mean? So. Yeah.
And the quality of the show is good, and it's well written and well produced and well directed. I mean, you just kind of forget about them things really quickly. You can't do anything. You're going to win. You're damned if you do and damned if you don't. But as I said, it was a good idea, though. I think of all the kind of explanations that they kind of have had a go at about this. I thought this one was the most interesting. And as I said, it was good actors in the actual episode.
Yeah.
You know, James Avery and so on. Put a bit
Yeah.
So it was
Uncle Phil himself, the voice of Shredder, the legend. R.I.P. big man. Yeah. But yeah, fantastic stuff. Yeah, well, DK, do you have anything before I jump into the sections?
I was very much a child of the FASA role-playing game.
So, there's been several of those chiming in on the behind-the-scenes section of the.
Yeah, so I was kind of, you know, the Klingon hybrid type, human hybrid type things. But back then, we didn't even have Next Generation, so you know, we didn't expect any of this bullshit to come up. It's, as you both, you know, said, it's just a suspension of disbelief. I never saw it as anything that needed addressing, and as a result, as much as, you know, it's a decent enough story, I just think it's kind of unnecessary.
There's more to the story than that, though, as I kind of was saying off air.
Oh, yeah.
It's unfair to reduce the entire story to that plot, because there's a lot in these episodes.
There is, but when you vehemently dislike another of the plots, you know, you've got to latch on to whatever you can.
Yeah, I see. Fair enough. Well, yeah, just to clue in the audience, if you are new here or you're unfamiliar, the way that we do our reviews is to break it down into sections that are like writing and plot, direction, acting, sound and music, special effects, and anything else other, basically. And then we'll, as I say, go into our favorite parts of the episode and give our conclusions. So the first thing would be the general writing and plot, and we've already basically started touching on this because Ken's given his thoughts. But the first thing that I had down for that is that obviously this is primarily the Klingon makeup explanation episode. So did we need it? Do you like it? And do you think it's at least amusing that it's kind of a combination of all the theories that were posited in Trials and Tribulations, which always kind of tickled me that it's literally everything they said combined? And do you think it's kind of cool that at least it links to the augment story from earlier in the season and back to Khan? And DK, I'll come to you first.
I think the writing is very clever, and I think they handled it really well. I think the writing on this, and if it had not been a great storyline and it was just there to prop up, you know, one discrepancy, then it would have failed miserably. But there is a good story underlying it.
Yeah. And what do you think about the way that it links back to the augment stories from earlier in season 4 and thus back to like Khan and all that?
I enjoyed it. I mean, I've always been a fan of Enterprise. I even liked it in, you know, season 1 and 2, but it was great stuff when Manny Koto came in. And yeah, I appreciate all these like little arcs that they did throughout the 4th season, and it was nice to see him refer back to that one. Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. And do you have any other thoughts, Ken, besides what we've talked about?
Yeah, I mean, constantly Enterprise gets bashed over the head for the way it addressed canon. And the problem with that show is that it had a lot of canon to address. So, you know, it was very hard to pick what could be pleasing to the fans and what couldn't be pleasing to the fans. So if you're going to introduce other aspects which we talk about in those episodes, for example, the idea that there was a love interest developing between you know, the crew and so on, and there's just loads going on in the episode. So I think they knew that if they were going to go with this idea of, you know, it's how the Klingons got you know, human looking in the Kirk episodes, you have to kind of notice that it's not all about that. And I think they knew that as well, because if they just went with that, it would fall flat in its face. So they introduced a lot of, you know, secret organizations. I mean, you know, and Lieutenant Reed, his commitments elsewhere. I thought they were all good. So it filled the show. The episodes were full. You know, they were actually, you had to keep your eye on it. You'd miss something, you know. And then, of course, there's the introduction of the Columbia as well, which I thought was brilliant, because finally, you got to see that, you know, Earth is not protected by one starship, which happens to be 20 light years away. So, you know, it was good to see that.
I've seen others.
Yeah. You wouldn't, as much as I like those ships, I wouldn't have them in a firefight. You know, so.
What the what's it called? The Warp Delta and the Sarajevo and the Intrepid? Yeah. You don't think they would be?
No. They're nice.
No, they were pretty crap looking, to be fair.
They were my favorites, but I wouldn't trust them in a scrap. You know.
No, I don't think they were designed to be Earth Defense Force, as you said. So anyway.
But I thought the writing was very good. The writing was very rich. It was in depth, and as much as they tried to do it, they obviously looked at that Deep Space Nine episode and they said, "Okay, let's pull lots of stuff from that one scene." you know, and it was good because I liked the way Worf in that scene in the DS9 episode said, "We don't talk about it."
Yeah, we just don't discuss it with outsiders, which now again makes so much more sense because of course
it does. Yeah,
it does, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really good connection to that episode, you know.
I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I noticed in the audience response when we get to it that a lot of people are taking this episode as a chance to shit on Discovery again because they ignored it and they went back and did even something else and something weirder and worse. And like I said, Strange New Worlds has kind of equally done arguably the wrong thing for canon, but because it's the more recognizable design, everyone's fine with it and whatever. So where do you stand with regards to the other prequels that followed Enterprise, which seem to have weirdly ignored this story?
Are you talking to me or DK?
Oh, either of you, either or, yeah.
I'll let you go first, Ken.
Well, look, I mean, again, I don't really think about those things too much. I just enjoy watching these series, and I kind of like the idea that, you know, it's not just about Captain Archer, and that you are seeing, you know, and as well, we saw another side of the Klingon civilization in the way they treat medical doctors and so on, and people from the arts, and that was kind of changing as well by the time we got to the next generation, where, you know, there was a lot more connections with artistic works, and, you know, there was poets and stuff mentioned, and the whole thing about Kahless and that kind of thing, you know. So I'm okay with that whole side of it. It's not, you know, people can say what they like really, but at the end of the day, the episode is not a bad episode, and neither is the following one, Divergence. They really link well, and there's a cliffhanger as well in between, and, you know, it does the job pretty well for me. It's not the best Enterprise two-parter, you know, but it's definitely a good one. And I think Manny Coto really, really looked at what happened in the previous seasons and said, we have to do something that's a bit more energetic and a bit more passionate. And all of the episodes, bar one or two in that final series, I thought were creme de la creme above anything that they'd done before with Enterprise. It was just a shame they didn't get season 5, because I think season 5 would have probably led to 6 and 7, you know, because they were no doubt going to deal with the Romulan War and that kind of thing. And, you know, it's just a shame, because definitely with Manny Kyoto at the helm, it was definitely a big improvement.
Yeah. I won't mention Manny Koto's political allegiances that have emerged since, unfortunately.
Oh, God, really?
Yeah.
Anyway.
People get old.
I despair.
Well, this is the, you know, the people that understand Star Trek also simultaneously just do not seem to understand it. But yeah, anyway. Don't just look it up for yourselves. So yeah, DK, what about you? Because like I said, it's not so much a judgment on this episode, but more that, like, it bugs me a little bit that people are using it to shit on Discovery for not following on from it, when in actual fact, like you said, this didn't exist, and people were kind of fine with the whole Klingons just looking different thing, and then they were fine with it now that it did exist, or some people didn't like it, and then now they're using its existence to attack something else that changed the makeup and stuff, and it's kind of like
you always have passionate fans, and regardless of what fandom, unfortunately, some passion can go to extremes. It's just with the social media, you hear a lot more of it. It's always going to be a problem when you do a prequel. I mean, but it can be something as big as the appearance of Klingons, but you can have, you know, there's a misplaced panel on one side of the ship that someone somewhere is going to notice, and they're going to haul someone over the coals for it regardless.
Yeah. Well, we've seen a few times. I mean, look at they cast a black actor as Robert April, and people were like, the cartoon character wasn't black. Yeah, he was also a cartoon.
And it's just, I mean, I hate to break out the Joel gif again, but it is just a show. You really should just relax. I mean, when it comes to Discovery, I wasn't happy what they did with the Klingons.
No, likewise,
I think, but now with hindsight, it just kind of merges into this hazy memory that Klingons were involved, and I'm happy with that. I can still watch it and not, you know, want to kick my TV screen in or go out and lambast some creative for a decision that they personally want to make. Life is too short to be getting so worked up about such minutiae.
And to be clear, it's not that I don't care. I'm kind of with Ken in that I take issue with the way the Klingons were represented on a social level, because they were a lot more monstrous and a lot more kind of extreme than I liked, at least in that first season.
Oh,
but
gosh,
but certainly like attacking the makeup.
Because, and at this point, I mean, it was what, 2017?
Yeah.
You know, you're 6 years out. you should not be still angry over that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, people still are. But anyway, like I said, I didn't want to spend too much time on that because there's other stuff. And I can personally...
just, when I get into an argument online with somebody about Last Jedi, I'm all there.
Oh, dear. Oh, dear. I mean, there are things in this episode to me, though, and again, maybe this is just me being an uber nerd, but there's things that let me rectify the Discovery and Strange New World stuff, because they even make a point of saying at the end of the episode, oh, things like cranial reconstruction are suddenly going to become very popular. So, like, maybe the Discovery Klingons are an attempt to genetically bring back the ridges that just effed up. And so they look really weird.
I think going back to that FASA Klingon hybrid kind of thing, I think when you rely on headcanon, you can explain anything. And you know this because you're a Doctor Who fan, for God's sake. You can rely on headcanon to explain away pretty much anything. It's when a creative goes, we'll do it this way, and sets it down in concrete, then you get a subsection of fans that see that it wasn't done in the way that their own headcanon allows it, and they take umbrage with that.
Yeah. And I'm a weird fan because I simultaneously love when episodes like this come around, which do give you that explanation, and it's kind of like, yay, I can reconcile that now. It's cool, awesome. But equally, if this episode had never happened, I could also very much just go with Gene Roddenberry's thing of like, look, just pretend they always looked like that. We just couldn't afford it.
Yeah,
so
absolutely, 100%. Like, I mean, they've done some mad things, like, especially in Voyager, where we suddenly realized that there was a dinosaur civil race that's kind of took its, it's now in, huge, making massive ships in space, and then Janeway becoming an amphibian for a few hours. I mean, look, these things you just pass them by. And I think the benefit of it is like what we spoke before, is that there are 92 episodes for you to like from Enterprise. You can, if this one is rubbish, well, then that's fine. I'm sure there's something else you like there. Yeah, and this is the whole idea. I know what you're saying. I agree with you 100%. If they hadn't have done Affliction or Divergence, it wouldn't have made a difference really overall. But I thought it was interesting. I enjoyed it. And as I said, he introduced a lot of other aspects, which, for me were very exciting.
Well, that actually leads me neatly on to the next thing, because the next thing I was going to bring up is that obviously, if you don't like this Klingon plot, that's fair enough. You're entitled to your opinion, but there's other things in the episode as well. And a lot of it is the continuing things from the rest of season 4. So, you've got the launch of Columbia that you've mentioned. We'd already seen it, but this is the official launch. We've met Captain Hernandez. We see her. We know that Trip is leaving. If you haven't seen the rest of the episodes, you wouldn't know it. But if you have, you know that Trip's leaving despite his protestations because he's uncomfortable. He's developed feelings for T'Pol. She's agreed to get married to this, button-down, stoic Vulcan dude, whatever. There's references back to Phlox was attacked in the start of season 4 for being an alien. They quickly reference that. So if you'd seen that episode, it's a nice bit of continuity. And even Archer saying, I can guide you through the mind meld because I had Surex Catra in my head. Again, clueless if you hadn't seen the previous episodes, but it doesn't bog down what's here. So do you guys kind of appreciate all of those kind of links back and those references? Or, the way they kind of tied all these serialized plots? Because again, we've talked at length about how people always criticize, the older pre-2017 Treks were always story of the week and then return to normal at the end of it. And every time I'm reviewing these episodes this season, it happened with Redemption and it's happened again here. I'm like, do you know what? There's an awful lot of serialization of stories that's there. I mean, you don't need to know the other ones, but if you do, it's really rewarding.
I'm still kind of doing tenuous links, and I've never bought into this episode of the week nonsense. They were obviously doing it in Deep Space Nine. They were doing it on this. They did it, for want of a better term, to, success on Voyager. I just, it might not have, as we were, talking about earlier, you might have got a lot more episodes in a season that didn't draw your attention to it as much. Yeah. But it's always been there. And I love these little references because nobody forgets where they are. Well, I mean, I forget where I am from week to week, but no one else, doesn't allude to an event from last week or
especially when it's something huge like that. Like Archer's not going to just suddenly forget that he held, the soul of the first Vulcan a few weeks back.
So, you know what I mean? So I love all this stuff. I love ARC TV, and it doesn't have to be pushed in your face all the time and say, every single episode's about the ARC. But you are going to refer to previous events.
Yeah, exactly.
I think they kind of, when all of those things popped up in these 2 episodes, they were briefly explained in a little sense. The way he said, well, I had his Catra in my head for a few weeks. You know, if you're remotely interested in Star Trek, you know what a Catra is. And if you're remotely interested in what he just said and you haven't seen the episodes, well, then you just need to go back and watch them.
Well, that's the thing. It's enough that you would, if you're interested, you would go and seek them out. And I liken it to what happens in comic books, where you'll have like an event referenced and then a little asterisk, and at the bottom it'll say like, go to issue 151 to see this event play out or whatever. You know?
Yeah, I like the whole idea where they introduced these things. I thought it was, you know, obviously they were going to develop on the relationship between Tucker and T'Pol for season 5, you know, and I'm not sure. I wonder when they did that last scene when she kissed him. I wonder if they knew that the series was cancelled. Maybe, guys, you know that. But
apparently not. They found out during the filming of In a Mirror Darkly.
Okay, because that looked a little rushed, I had to say. That actual whole, you know, scene and the whole kind of development throughout the two episodes, particularly where they were daydreaming and that kind of stuff, which I thought was a bit strange. But anyway, that whole thing was rushed.
I think it was more that, like, on a TV basis, a lot of people tend to think, oh, you can't get your couples together because will they, won't they can sustain a show. And it could in the 80s. I mean, if you look at Moonlighting or Cheers or whatever else. But audiences nowadays just aren't going to stand for that crap. They're not going to sit with you, you know, oh, will they, won't they get together? Will they pass in the night? What other complication is there? So I think it was more that they were aware that the audience at this point, certainly I was just thinking, shit, I'll get off the pot, you know? Either get together or break up, but decide one way or the other.
Who wouldn't? You know what I mean? Like, let's be honest, you know, I don't know, but an Irish lad would be moving in far quicker than what was going on there. So I don't know whether he had this southern charm thing going on with him. But, you know, Irish lads would have been in there like Flynn, you know. And, and the other thing I really liked about that episodes was that she kind of made a joke. You remember towards the end of the episode, and they were like looking at each other as if say, holy shit, there's more of her in you than you think, you know, and that was good. I thought that was good as well, because there was a kind of developing there where, and you saw actually in the first scene in that, you know, the travesty, that was the last, these are the voyages. T'Pol's much more kind of down to earth and talkative. She's not so sticky at all. So, absolutely, you know, that was kind of the beginning of that, I thought. But yeah, it's good to see that. And then, of course, you know, we also got to see kind of a side of Lieutenant Reed that we'd never saw before. Because
unfortunately,
you know, tell you how a chap steps away and all that sort of stuff. You know, he even mentions it, you know, your father was in the Navy and all that kind of stuff. But to see that he was in this sneaky organization, that's Section 31, and you know, it's like kind of, that was good. I like that. I like the fact that
you're on your own on that one.
I like that they had the same uniforms though as well as the guy, you know, from Deep Space Nine. It was kind of,
course, it's just black jackets. It's not hard.
I think it was the same crossover though, double-breasted crossover as well.
Oh,
so,
maybe
So that was good.
No, I've mentioned it when you've got a bit of a belly though.
Yes, it doesn't work. And that guy did kind of have one, didn't he, as well? He was a bit
poor Eric Pierpoint.
He was a bit flippity, wasn't he? Didn't have the kind of evil sneer that we got off the other lads, you know. I thought he was a bit whimsy, you know, especially when he got caught out by the Klingon. The Klingon just kind of gave him the finger and said good luck, you know. He's like, but I thought we had a deal. You know,
but like, again, there's so many cool little lines, but I kind of loved, first of all, but what you were saying, I kind of loved the kind of T'Pol trying not to look embarrassed when Hoshi's like, I'm having weird sex dreams about. And then later on, when the Klingon's just like, he just signs off with the equivalent of a middle finger, as you say, when she's like, you told me we were going to work together, and you believed me.
I mean, my card now, you know. That was brilliant. I enjoyed that now. That was pretty cool.
But now, to bring it back to what I was saying, as I've mentioned in depth all throughout this, I hate Section 31. I don't think they work in the Trek universe. This is one of the least...
I detest them as well.
Yeah.
Actually, I hate them. I hate the whole thing in Discovery and all the way they had their own ships and everything just was fun. Yeah, I hated it all. I kind of wanted to just go back in time and get your man Daniels or whoever said, look, will you just put a bullet in that dude's head that came up with this idea, please? Because as you said, it's ridiculous. It's stupid. It's like something that they introduced because of the time in the 90s when, you know, after
it's DS9, you know what I mean? I rage about it all the time. All the people that are always like, DS9's the best series. Yeah, it's also the worst because it gave us a lot of the anti-Trek shit that everyone was like, "Ooh, this is such a cool idea."
That was going on in America, that people were writing this kind of the whole kind of, you know, the kind of paranoia that was happening. So I think that was a result of that. And it was gone by the time, as you say, Discovery and all. I think it looked I think it ruined Discovery, if you ask me, the whole thing. You know, it was already going in a bad place, but then it was great. Yeah. But I didn't mind it here, actually. because it wasn't. It was more about Malcolm's kind of his kind of loyalties. I thought that was really good. Rather, they could have kind of made it something else. You didn't even need to make it.
That's what I was gonna say. It's like that's what bugs me is that you didn't need to make it Section 31. It was clearly just like, oh, we recognize that. You could have just said it was Starfleet intelligence.
I did like to see it though, even though I think Reed actually, I think Malcolm Reed is one of the poorest characters on Enterprise. Actually.
Oh, I like him personally.
Really,
I would though. I mean, I'm English, so I just relate.
yeah. He was in there. You know, what was it? The one about the barber shop.
Desmond's.
Yeah,
I love that show, man.
Yeah. So like, I don't know. I've never been too crazy about him as an actor. I think he's
a relatability thing. I'm British, extremely reserved and terrible with women, so I just see myself when I watch Reed, you know.
Yeah, it's just I don't know. I think it's Dominic Keaton. I think he always looks like he's about to burst into tears. I can't tell you, sir. I just can't.
I think he's great, and I like this. I will say that as much as I hate Section 31, the way that it was used as a kind of special ops. You know, more modern, you know, spycraft kind of idea, at least is done well in this episode. And it gives you the chance to basically have Malcolm also middle finger the guy at the end and be like, look, I answered to one commanding officer, Jonathan Archer, hang up mid-conversation, go back to me book. But So what about you, DK? What did you make of any of these things, including the Section 31 plot, DK?
I like the drama of. I like the whole thing with reading the break, but as you say, it could have been done with, you know, special ops or something like that. Yeah. I just have a loathing of Section 31, which is weird because DS9 is my favorite show. But yeah, it worked. The drama worked. I could have happily done with that. It added another layer to the show, and I thought it was really good, especially when, you know, Archer was in the scenes between Archer and Reed when he went to visit him in the break. But the Section 31 angle, I could have really just done without. As far as the relationship with Trip and T'Pol, I did like that. Even the weird kind of, you know, daydream kind of Hudsucker Proxy Tim.
It was a bit soap opera for me, to be honest.
Yeah, doing dancing in the background. But I did enjoy it, and I know she got a lot of stick. As an actress,
did she?
Jolene Blaylock was really
great
good in this. Yeah, I think she was great in this, and she had this. She had an atmosphere all the way through of being kind of broken.
Yeah,
and I love
especially after season 3.
I'll be honest, I much preferred the subplots to the main ones on this.
Yeah,
and don't get me wrong, I did like how it was handled in Divergence. But by the time that, you know, raiding party of Jason Momoa showed up, the main plot, I was just like, no.
My man. A major plot thing that I want to talk about is, let me just sit you both down and say, pop quiz, hotshot. Dennis Hopper has raided your ship with a bunch of Klingons. He's planted a bomb on the warp core. Your ships cannot go below 50 warp miles per warp 5.2 or whatever. So your ships are about to explode.
That actually, Jesus, yeah.
What do you do?
Oh, it is a blatant. It is speed in space to the point that, like, they even have Trip in the Keanu Reeves. We need to get you across from this speeding thing somehow. It's like, somebody watched Speed that weekend and was like, "Ooh, wouldn't this be cool with spaceships?"
Right.
So what did you?
That's weird. I never thought of that before. Maybe that's because I don't watch films like Speed.
Oh, okay.
Jesus, yeah, that makes a lot of sense now. Yeah, that's mad. Kind of ruins it now. Thanks very much.
The first note I have written for Divergence is Speed! !
Jesus, come on. Last time I watched that movie, I think I was doing my leaving cert or something like that. You know, it's like I was in school or something. You know, but
I enjoy it for what it is. I mean, it's a decent movie, but it's kind of like you said, when you see it, you can't unsee it, and at least it's done well because it's done well because not everybody immediately like. I'm surprised that there wasn't a backlash of everybody like, what, somebody watched Speed, but when you do know it, you're kind of like, oh crap, it really is.
Yeah, I
so
think
much.
Now it would probably be hammered, you know, because
can you imagine if Twitter had been around at that point?
Exactly. Jesus Christ, they would have just had heads. You know, they would have imposed somebody's head on it or whatever. It's just it's crazy. But yeah, again, the one thing I did like about it was that we originally got to see the way the Enterprise was initially designed. Remember, they kind of had it the other way around, and then they went, "No, it looks better." So it was interesting to see when
they do that a lot.
The Columbia was upside down. You kind of went, "Ooh, that's how it would have looked if it had been designed."
It looks even more like an Akira class.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it's weird. Yeah, it's still, I like that. I thought that was really interesting. I was kind of pausing and going, So
I'm always a sucker for any time they realize that they don't have to have ships all oriented the same way because you're in space. So it's like somebody finally realized that it's like, oh, the ship's upside down. Well, no, it's not. There's no. What are you relative to?
It's like to you, Mike. Says, remember, kids, when two ships love each other very much. It's like I remember a lot of backlash with regards to the design of the Enterprise, and it's part of me thinks it's the producers going, "Listen, these ships fuck."
That's the title of the episode, right there. Thank you. Listen, these ships. So, fair enough, but no, I do love that block because it for me the special effects really work. It's exciting. It did keep me on the edge of my seat. I was thrilled. I was kind of rooting for Trip. I still don't fully understand how Captain Archer was like, "I don't trust you, Reed, but come out of the brig and be left completely alone to bring this guy into the."
We have no one else that can stand by a tether.
And say, "Coming apart! Come on, it's coming apart!"
I mean, fair enough. I can sustain disbelief of like you're the only one with the training, but like, there's not a guard there to make sure he doesn't just push Trip out when he's like, "Oh, he didn't make it, Captain. Oh no!" Because
our first thought when we were watching it is the engineering crew on the Columbia going, "Woo, bastard's gone."
The engineering crew just sitting with a giant pair of scissors, usually used for opening a supermarket, on the tether, just like, it'd be so easy.
While on the Enterprise, Kelby sat with his head in his hands in some dark corner somewhere, going, "Oh God, really?"
Seth MacFarlane is going, "Yes, fantastic."
Got rid of him. I can do the Orville now.
Yeah, exactly. He was pulling his voice on the radio or probably on the intercom saying, "I hate this place, I'm leaving."
Yeah. Fair enough. But no, I like it. So did you guys have any other thoughts? Do you want to say anything about the ships that F?
That was my favorite scene. Seriously, I'm not just doing it because I'm
taking the piss out of Speed, and then it's your favorite scene. They must have done something.
It's done well, yeah.
It's done really well, and despite, I mean, it's hokey as hell, but there is a tension there, especially when the anchor's coming loose.
Yeah. It's just done well, dramatic tension, and it just
didn't just kind of float away. That was good the way.
Yeah, it just came loose, and
that was good. I like.
I mean, I'm sure there's going to be people that nitpick that that's not how warp bubbles work or whatever else, but I just do not care. It looked cool, you know? So, fair enough. So just a couple of other sort of plot things that I wanted to talk about that I kind of noted and liked. I liked the idea that was put forth at the end about, like, basically Russian roulette with the Klingon virus. It was such a cool kind of Klingon thing to do that Uncle Phil was... Sorry, I don't know the character's name. Uncle Phil was basically like, "You have 3 healthy Klingons here. Inject us." So,
it brought up the trolley car problem years before the Good Place.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I kind of like that because it feeds into the Klingon idea, and you're also having a bit of tension that way. I'm kind of confused that Enterprise and Columbia just got away with straight up invading Klingon space. Like, nobody seemed to question. Surely they should start a war at that point. They were just like, "Take us to that Klingon colony planet, not a problem." Just
he was what you call it? He was Klingon's most wanted, wasn't he? He was
exactly. Yeah, it's cliche, and I've mentioned it a lot of times, but I'm a sucker for the ticking clock. So I like the idea of like, we need to somehow do something because the admiral of the Klingon fleet will blow up this entire colony and purify us if we don't do it, and then. I know it's not super ethical and it's not something I should love as a Trek fan, but I do kind of love Phlox's solution of just like, well, we've beamed the virus to you, so you're infected, so you can either let us get on with it or die. It's your choices, buddy, you know?
But then Klingon, like in reference to the other previous, scenes, he should have said, "I don't care. Open fire."
Well, no, because the whole point is like, what's the point at that stage? It's like, well, you have a cure, so you can save yourself and your ship, or die along with the colony for no reason.
We're talking about Klingons here, though, you know. So,
well, yeah, they're horribly inconsistent. So
nothing ever makes sense with them. Like, you know,
yeah.
The other thing that really annoyed me about that episode was the background in the Columbia with them things pulsing backwards and forwards.
Oh, that would piss me off if I was on that ship. That would do your head straight in, wouldn't it?
Thought of that idea. Like this pulsing shit happens. Like, I mean, it would drive anybody bonkers looking at that all day, especially if you weren't looking forward. And I just thought it was just
wouldn't want to be on the
useless idea to make it look different. I did not get that. I said that's just too much to make it look different.
I'm going to say, if you're sat at Hoshi's station on the Columbia, you're going to end up with epilepsy, surely.
Yeah, you would absolutely. Yeah. You're a damn headache.
You would, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it'd be like that original series episode with the light shining on the Van Gelder guy. He's the lights. Maybe that was the point. Maybe they were all a crew of criminally insane people they were trying to cure. I don't know.
Or you just say,
well, that explains Seth MacFarlane.
He was transferred from the Enterprise, you jerk.
Probably because he belonged there.
I'm going to move us on because we've been talking for a while. So I'm going to move to the next bit. I'll ask you first. Any other thoughts on like the writing and the plot, you guys?
The only other note I have is for the opening from Affliction, where they bring that Klingon in, strap him down, and put that IV up. And the only note I have is Klingon cooler gives you a really fucking weird brain freeze.
Oh, you are on fire this episode, DK. Whatever you've been drinking is working for you, man.
Are we not going to talk about Archer's ridges as well? We know.
I did have that note. Yeah. Any excuse to give Archer some ridges?
I mean, he's already been Vulcan. Now he's Klingon. I think by the time he ended his career, Archer is the only captain in Federation history to have been every single fucking race.
That's because he turned into Daniels. He doesn't know he was talking to himself. Because remember, he asked Daniels, what are you using on a mix of a lot of other things?
Yeah. Perhaps by season 6, he's running around with, a Tellarite nose.
It was cool, but it was very much like this is a fan service moment. I thought that bit of like, I'll give Archer quickly some ridges at the end of the episode and let him talk about having a craving for gach or whatever.
Yeah, that was that all about. That was just ridiculous as well. Yeah.
But so I'm going to get into the direction and the special effects because I only have a handful of notes. First of all, I did like the little scene inside Hoshi's memory during the mind meld. Again, it's not groundbreaking to do the like spooky moment. It's a memory moment, but it was cool. I thought it worked. I personally liked the dual battle between the Klingon ship and the Enterprise in space. Which was also cutting in with the raiding party of Aquamans. I thought they were a good little dual battle moment. A couple of shots that I noticed, the way that they framed Reed inside of the, I want to say bars, but they're not bars, the little holes or whatever in the jail cell. And for whatever reason, I just love this, the epic zoom in to the Columbia Bridge through the ship. Like the way that that's done is just so cool. Like how has that never been done in a Trek series before? To just, we're at high warp, so let's zoom the camera straight in through the front of the ship to us. So cool. I do like the Columbia. I think she's a beautiful ship. And that scene where they merge warp bubbles is just like, as I've said, so cool. Like even 10 years earlier, that scene would not have worked. You've got to have mastered a level of CGI that makes it not look shoddy. And I don't think it would have been anywhere near as good with models. I don't think you could have made it look anything less than hanging two things close together. Love the Klingon ship designs.
Enterprise from a special effects point of view, it holds up okay, but when you see bodies or people, that's when it really falls flat. But I thought it was good in terms of the actual design of the ships.
I did want to go to the acting. So the first person, obviously, we have to deal with would be the star of the show, the lead, Scott Bakula. Any thoughts on him in these 2 episodes? And DK, why don't we come to you first?
I thought he was really good. I much prefer Boy Scout Archer from the first couple of seasons before he became, just completely just fed up with everything.
I didn't really see it. The only thing I noticed is that I really loved the way he dealt with the Malcolm situation kind of thing, because he got a chance to be a hard ass and still care. You know what I mean? So yeah. Anyway,
he was much more friendly in the first couple of series. But Trip made me the MVP in these episodes, but I think Archer was fantastic. I've never got a bad word to say about Archer. He gets a lot of stick for being a bad captain, but I've never seen it.
No. Yeah, no, I love him anyway. And I know, Ken, you love him, so you would have loved this episode.
Yeah, there was a lot of, joy about that, and it must have been kind of weird to film. I suppose if you're an experienced actor, you might be used to it. There was a lot of close-ups, like face-to-face close-ups, like they were spitting in each other's mouth.
Especially for filming in HD for the first time, you've got to think it was kind of like, oh shit, we're going to have to really put on makeup. And,
Yeah. So there was a lot of that kind of face-to-face, nose-to-nose stuff, especially between Reed and Archer. So I thought that was pretty cool. I thought that worked very well because I
love that physicality of Bakula though when he's arguing and he seems to literally be like pushing you into the wall without touching you, and he's like, "Listen, man, tell me what's going on," kind of thing, you know. So.
Yeah, no, he's towering over him, wasn't he? And Malcolm was like, "Oliver, please, sir.
I can't, sir. I can't tell you, sir. I need the toilet, Captain."
He's just Malcolm, such a.
I love pineapple.
Yes. How did you know it was pineapple? We're going to bust a midnight oil on this one, guys.
Oh my word! So yeah, you kind of touched on it. So next, obviously, we have to talk Connor Trinier Trip in these episodes. So Ken, we'll come to you this time. What do you think of Trip in these?
Again, I mean, I think I spoke a lot about it when we were talking about the love interest with T'Pol. I don't think he ever changed throughout the series. He was always quite sharp and off the hook. You know, he could lose the head very quickly. He's a bit of a miracle worker. He's better than Scotty, anyway, that's for sure. Because when I looked at the Columbia, it looked like it was a wreck until he came along.
That cold start thing as well is one heck of a maneuver. I don't understand these specifics.
So I like that because that was like, you know, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, head, you know, so that was good. It was a kind of something that Geordie would never do. Coolant leak, you know, he just.
And yet, when you break it down in much the same way as the speed thing, that is basically Trip's way of going, we got a virus, turn it off and on again.
Yeah. But again, I suppose it's in reference to the fact I think the computer systems were a bit more simpler, probably. But as I said, Geordie would have just dumped the war core and had a spare one there.
He'd have been rolling under the door.
Rolling under a door.
Yeah, exactly. And being dog ignorant to his old staff. But anyway, I thought Trinier played a great role overall in Enterprise, and I really liked him. I actually thought that if you're ever going to kill off somebody, it was the worst person to kill off. So I thought it was great that, you know, he was kind of very solid in the episode. He didn't kind of lose the head as much as the others did. And I like the way he's kind of happy to stay on the ship all the time, which is handy. But I didn't like the toing and froing between Columbia. I thought that was kind of like, you know, this is going to end real quick. He's going to be back before you know it. So that was weird to watch, you know, in some ways. So, but other than that, he always gets the best lines as well, I think, in Enterprise, you know. Yeah,
that storyline fell very flat for me as well, because it's kind of like when you've got a lead of your show like that, they're not going to end up on a different ship and be written off. And it was very
before the lights were switched off in engineering. You know?
That's what I mean. It was very clunky at the end when they were like, "Oh well, you're going to be sticking around here for a few days." I was like, "Of course you are, because you're never going back." You know what I mean? So, yeah, fair enough. What about you, DK and Connor Trinier?
Oh, I always love Connor Trinier in this. He's the heart of the show, really, when it comes to it. And I think he's really, again, like you, I didn't like the sitcom way it was dealt with at the end with regards to the Columbia situation. I do like the fact that whatever ship Trip isn't on instantly goes to shit. He's a good guy to have around. So, yeah. Always stable, as Ken said. He never really changed, and he's to me he's the most likable. He's the most likable cast member, and I
instantly liked him when I saw the very first episode of Enterprise. You know, I'm glad he got rid of the third stuff that he used to quote very earlier on. That was all dropped very quickly. I'm just looking up some trivia actually about this episode. James Avery was in the running for Worf, actually.
Really? I did not know that. That makes kind of sense. Yeah.
Yeah, I was glad that didn't happen, obviously, because you wouldn't have Worf now.
Yeah. And you might not have Uncle Phil, because Fresh Prince was like that era.
Yeah.
So I think they ended up in the right roles between the two of them, man.
Yeah, exactly. I think a lot of James Avery fans would have copped him in that role because he just was very different to the role that he played.
But yet, you kind of wonder why he wasn't cast as a Klingon before, because he's perfect. Like, he's got the James Avery, he's got the physicality and he's got the acting chops. And then you look at, like, he's played Shredder for years, so he's done the kind of intimidating villain bit as well, you know?
Yeah, he definitely had he had the command of each scene coming in the door, you know? You have 1 hour.
Yeah.
Okay.
And again, in terms of funny scenes, I do love that when he's like, Phlox, explain to me what's happening. Give me details. And he then goes into like some, psychobabble explanation. And he's like, details I can pass on to my superiors.
Every government was nodding their head there. Every person who works as a in the back streets of a government knows exactly what he meant by that.
Yeah.
But, I thought he was excellent in that role. You needed something. I like the other guy though. Who was the other guy?
Antok, played by John Schuck, the guy who played the Klingon ambassador in Star Trek 4 and 6. Weirdly,
good. Yeah, he was good. I liked him, especially.
Yeah, he was fantastic. I love that character because, like you said, he's not a typical Klingon. He's like, I'm looked down on because I'm a healer, but I'd rather save lives than worry more about honor. And there's no more honorable thing to do than give your life to save millions of others and everything. And it's like, this is such a cool character, even right down to the end. Like, he's the one you see without the forehead ridges, and he's like, even my Targ wouldn't recognize me, but never mind, I guess. So, yeah, he was cool. So I will say very quickly, I personally like Seth MacFarlane, so I didn't mind. I know DK had issue, wanted to punch his TV. So
that's just a reaction whenever I see Seth MacFarlane, mate. It's nothing to do with the episode.
I kind of feel that way as well.
I don't really have much else because I don't want to say other than music, great dramatic emphasis, but fairly standard, I would say. So yeah, do you guys have any other notes before I move us to the favorite character moment and line? Because we've been talking a while.
No, I'm out.
Yeah.
Awesome. So we'll go to that part next then. So I will start breaking down and ask everybody's favorite parts.
Spark analysis.
So we always go to the guest first. So Ken, who was your favorite character in these 2 episodes?
James Avery playing that role that he
General
played.
Kavak.
General Kavak, yeah, very good.
Would blood wine affect the results?
Yes. That's dead. Yeah, like that. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, he was great. He was brilliant. I liked him. Great presence when he came into the scene and, stood out and, had a very commanding presence, which sometimes Klingons don't. They can look comedic a lot. Maybe J.G. Hertzler is one guy who doesn't do that. Yeah. He had a great ability to have a little bit of that comedic value into it, but at the same time, he could be menacing. And I thought that James Avery was similar to him in that. So he played that role really, really well. He looked like he'd chop your head off if you said the wrong word. Yeah,
cool. And so what about you, DK? Who was your favorite character?
I'm going to go with my man Archer.
Oh, okay. Wow. Okay.
Yeah. This was just crisis after crisis after crisis, and I think he handled it brilliantly. And as I said before, he gets a lot of stick for not being a good captain, but I think a lot of the main captains in each series would have been hard pressed to put up with some of the crap that he put up with in this one.
Yeah, fair enough. My favorite character was another of the Klingons. Mine was Antok. As I said, I like that he's an atypical Klingon because he's a healer, but he's honorable in his own way, and it's really nice. And he gets a genuine arc across these 2 episodes of like growing into understanding everything and having to be, he's ashamed of coming up with this and then trying to find the cure for it to kind of restore his honor in that way. And like I said, you realize it's the guy who played the Klingon ambassador in the movies, and it's night and day. Like, I hate that Klingon ambassador who's all like, Kirk should be sentenced to death for this and whatever. But I love this Antok guy because he's so much more sympathetic. And
puppy dog eyes in the whole 2 episodes, didn't he? Like, look at me, I'm so sorry and I'm so sad.
Yeah, precisely. But so that was my favorite character, was him. And so what was your favorite moment or scene, Ken, in the episode?
I liked the brig scene. That was the best,
Oh, yeah, that was.
I can't tell you, Captain. I just can't tell you. I thought that was really funny.
You are lucky. If a Klingon lied to his captain, he'd be killed.
Yes. Yeah. No, just the first scene when you put him in there, I thought that was really good because, as I said, they got really close face to face, and it was kind of like, I'd say they had a few giggles doing that, But it was good. We saw Malcolm, at his kind of weak point because he's always
like pineapple, Malcolm.
What's that? What?
Like Archer got up so close, he was like, "You smell like pineapple, Malcolm." I'm sorry, sir.
That's the thing. He always used to look very strong in all the episodes and always kind of sure of himself. And there he didn't. It was a real conflict. So while I didn't think he played that role, that series pretty well, I thought his acting was a bit hammy. I liked the scene.
Fair enough. TK, you're seeing. You've kind of already told us, I think, but
it's the tether scene.
Yeah, same. And we've talked on the reasons why dramatic, tense, look good.
The space rope. In the 1960s, it would have been called the space rope.
Speed 3 trip controls. And so your favorite line in the episode, Ken, if you can think of one.
I like the line that you were just saying there. Blood wine will affect the
results. Yeah,
that was brilliant. And the other one as well. Like, it was only thinking when you said that to me. I tell me so I can tell my Klingon superiors. That was good. I like.
Yeah. Those were cool. What about you, DK?
You've mentioned this one earlier as well. Given the choice between honor and saving lives, I choose the latter.
Yes, those were all great choices. But personally, I went with the line "permission to come aboard" from Trip, because I just think it's the perfect release of tension after that really tense scene and everything. And it's like the level of sarcasm when he's like collapsed into Malcolm. The tether's flown off out of the ship. It's like, Bridge, we have him. Permission to come aboard. So
yeah. It's kind of something you would say, though, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't unbelievable, but it was the way Trinia played it as kind of like
a lot of people, I think, would say to go with that line. Actually, so, it's pretty cool. Yeah.
Malcolm's like, "Don't ask me, mate. I've just come from prison."
Yes. Where are these guys taking you? They're taking me to Paul's bedroom. While you've been away.
He does have a nice bum.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah.
So, the next part then, just before we end up, giving our final thoughts, would be to jump to the audience response, because I have a lot on this one. Like I said, the idea of the Klingon storyline, I think, more than anything, galvanized everyone. So across various Facebook groups, I got a ton of responses, and I want to try and talk about a few as much as I can.
Incoming transmission.
So first of all, Mike Matthews says, "What if we came to accept that each Trek series has its own parallel reality, very similar but subtly different?" Don't agree, but you do you. Greg Cox says, "Honestly, I preferred the way DS9 handled it. Just wink at it and move on. Not every change in art direction needs an in-universe explanation." Yeah, okay. Ashley Kells says, "I do agree the DS9 explanation was sufficient, but I like how they work the details of the explanation into Enterprise." Okay. Wes Huntington says this two-parter really shouldn't have happened because fans now see this as, "Hey, Discovery, did you forget this?" and launched a whole bunch of vitriolic hate against the powers that be for it, which we touched on. So, yeah. Douglas Neri Jr. Exactly. Well, Douglas Neri Jr. says, "Was the explanation really needed after 26 years at that point? No. Am I glad we got it? Yes, I really did enjoy those episodes." So, yeah. Daniel Rudolph says, "I agree. It felt like a forced explanation, and there are things which are better when kept a mystery." Brent's Videos Journal simply says, "Love it," with a little heart emoji. Laurie Ulster says, "I'm not a big Enterprise fan, but I like these episodes and that they decided to find a way to explain this part of history."
I think that person from this show immediately.
Rick Warren says, "I think it was very clever and a good in-universe explanation, especially since it used parts of both suggestions from Trials and Tribulations. And then Discovery decided we needed a new kind of Klingon and blah, blah, blah." I'm going to address that. Eddie Klein says, "It was a bit contrived, but I appreciated the effort." Gustavo Naranjo says, "I liked it. The whole saga. I actually love Enterprise. But again, I grew up watching 80s and 90s television, so it could be an acquired taste." Brad Smith says, "It was fine, and I like Section 31. Fair enough. Ken Buckler says, "Absolutely missed opportunity to make it more humorous. Like they intentionally modified the genetics to try and get Tribbles to stop attacking them or something." I kind of want to see that now. I do like that idea.
They turn into zombie Tribbles then. That would be fun.
Sean O'Neill says, "It was a fine episode, but its explanation for the changing Klingon appearance isn't perfect. Based on what Enterprise tells us, we should have seen ridged forehead Klingons in TOS as well as smooth forehead." Again, we can't wave it away. Yeah. Timothy Jackson says, "Super fun two-parter. Even Archer got some ridges out of the deal. I suppose the only issue is that Discovery and Strange New Worlds have disregarded this arc, but I understand the rationale for that with modern audiences. I believe this also enhances the Trip leaving Enterprise because of the Paul arc, which was fantastic." Ryan Leveger says, "All I ever really needed for the Klingons was Worf's line from Trials and Tribulations that it is a long story. We do not discuss it with outsiders. It was the most perfect lampshading ever. I wasn't upset with Enterprise for doing the story, and it made sense. I just didn't feel like there was a need to do it. I liked the merging the warp fields and how they dealt with the mechanics of that. We don't often get into the details of ships at warp interacting, so it was interesting to learn a little more about some of that." Where was I? Greg Cox says, "I remember enjoying the episodes on their own terms. Just didn't think an explanation was all that necessary a half century after the motion picture, but didn't say I hated the actual episodes." And let's see what. And Rick Everson, who you will have heard on the podcast a few times, did chime in and say, "Okay, I think we absolutely did not need this. I didn't even want DS9 to acknowledge it in the Tribbles episode. As far as I was concerned, it was purely makeup advances, and we just had to accept that TOS Klingons would have had ridges if they could have afforded it. That said, I really enjoyed this two-parter. By this point, Enterprise had really ramped up, and this was just great stuff. The link back to the Augment story was great, and if you're going to explain it, this was as good a reason as any, and lends further credence to the general dislike of genetic engineering, with an example going wrong. I'm taking or leave it about Section 31 stuff. They served a purpose to keep the characters moving along. What was much cooler was seeing Trip having to abseil between two ships, and seeing more Columbia and Captain Hernandez was also great stuff. And yes, James Avery was flipping amazing as a Klingon, and it makes you wonder why he wasn't tapped up to play one years earlier. Camos Mills says, I enjoyed it. Wasn't really knowledgeable about TOS at the time, but my dad, as a lifelong fan, was satisfied and happy to finally get an in-universe answer. He loved all the series, but was very frustrated, though still enjoyed the Tribbles DS9 episode, with Worf just remarking, we don't discuss it with others. Karmit Azuli says, it was a great way to tie stories together. The many fans pay attention to these details. Look at how many fan discussions there are about inconsistencies. Many of us appreciated the explanation, even if other people didn't. And that's it. That's all I have for this episode. All that remains now is for us to give our conclusions and our score out of 5 stars. So, Ken, as the guest, are you happy to go first and give us your conclusion and score?
Yeah, very good episode. It kind of went with the flow of the improvements of the season 4 overall. And I think it's a nice insert there. And you look back on it, and it does tell an important part of the story, which probably has been told hundreds of times by fan films and so on. So it was nice to have something official. So I'd give it 4 out of 5.
Awesome. Great. That's fair enough. 4 out of 5. DK, what about you? Your conclusion and score, please.
Don't get me wrong. I love Enterprise. I enjoyed this and it held my attention, but it wasn't entirely necessary. Its premise is just there to explain one single discrepancy. And yes, there's a lot happens in here. But despite the good drama with Malcolm, I've never been a huge fan of Section 31 storylines. So while I think it's a decent enough story with solid performances and some great Trek moments, unfortunately for me, despite that, it never really reaches the peak of Trek, and I've given it 3.5.
Okay, fair enough. So I said it was a rip-roaring adventure. It frequently had my heart racing and kept me on the edge of my seat, and it's all built around the ultimate nerdy nitpick. I may not have desperately needed an answer to the Klingon thing, but I actually love the one provided. And yes, I do get a certain fan glee from being able to officially square that circle. This episode is much more than just that plot, though. The thrilling space battles, the daring speed, let's be generous and say homage, continuing plot lines, well-drawn characters, regular and guest stars, and 90 minutes that's never less than completely engaging and doesn't slow down, no pun intended. I don't love Section 31, as I've made clear, and I could live without their presence here, knowing what they are, but the plot and acting it provides to this story are almost worth it. It's at least the best usage of them as a sort of Earth Black Ops Secret Service MI6 kind of idea. Besides this and my own distaste and frustration at the ongoing Trip and T'Pol will they or won't they nonsense, there's not a lot to complain about. Fun, rewatchable, some really brilliant scenes, good effects, acting, excitement. Yeah, this is a great and incredibly well done story. And I actually give it 4.5 out of 5.
I didn't know we could give points. I don't know. Okay. I've been very old-fashioned there, giving it 4 out of 5. I probably would give it 4.5.
I can change it if you want.
Oh, come on. Sorry. I think we've all been fairly generous with it anyway.
It makes the average easy to work out because we always, add it together, divide it by 3. But
exactly.
Not that I needed to do that between us, because 3.5, 4, and 4.5 means the average is pretty easy to work out. So the final podcast score for Affliction and Divergence would be 4 out of 5. Which, it's going to be near the top of the leaderboard, I think. Not that high, but it'll be there. So, yeah, I'm happy. I love these episodes personally. I can't really explain necessarily why, but hopefully that came across and I made my thoughts clear. So, just remains for me to say now, thank you so much to our guest, Ken, from the Comfortable Podcast. Thank you for joining us, Ken.
I'm very welcome to be here. It's so wonderful. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. And do you want to shout out where people can find you and your podcast on the interwebs?
Yeah, sure. I do loads of stuff, but the best way to find me is the comfortablespotpodcast.com. If you just Google Comfortable Spot Podcast, you'll see my ugly face. So there you go.
Fair enough. And you can always find me and DK via the little links in our description. We have a couple of link trees and things there. And as I mentioned up front, do kind of look into that Star Trek Prodigy stuff, the campaign, and sign the petition if you haven't, that I'll link. And maybe go back and watch our Timer mock review. So, DK, have you had a good one this app?
I have. I've enjoyed this.
Awesome. it's always good talking Trek. So I think I'm maybe shuffling around a couple of episodes that we've recorded in release order because I'm having an issue with editing and stuff with somebody that's supposed to be helping out. And, you can't always rely on speed when it comes to other people. But yeah, so I'm not sure what the next episode is that will actually air, but I think the next one I'm recording will be DK. You're sitting that one out. It's going to be just me and Sandra, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct.
So it will be either next week or the week after. It'll be a review of the DS9 episode Soldiers of the Empire. So that should be interesting, and that may just be the two of us. But keep it real. Maybe a bit shorter than this episode because I think we've probably run a bit longer than usual. But hopefully we've entertained you and you didn't just switch off. So yeah, thanks again, Ken and DK. Thank you for listening. If you still are, and yeah, join us again. I think are going on a quick break after the next couple of episodes. But we will be back for the second half of the season later in the year. We're just basically trying to give us a summer break and focus on the getting a couple of silver screen podcasts up and running and things like that. So stay tuned. We will have in between that break, though, I'm trying to get together a new top 10 episode to tide you over. So we'll see if that comes together. Hopefully it will. And come and join us again for the next episode. And in the meantime, remember, we are Starfleet. Live long and prosper. Kapla.
Live long and prosper.
Oh boy. Kapla.
You have been listening to the Hit or Miss Star Trek podcast, hosted by Michael Wilson and DK. Created, produced, and edited by Michael Wilson. Additional material produced by DK. Music by Timeless Journey. More information can be found at soundcloud.com/Timeless Journey. The Hit or Miss Star Trek podcast is based on an idea by Michael Wilson and Will Templar. Follow the podcast on Instagram at HoM Star Trek Podcast, or look for the Hit or Miss Star Trek podcast under Facebook groups. Links to all our social media accounts and more are in this episode's description. This podcast is available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Just look for Silver Screen Hit or Miss Star Trek. This has been a Mike's Podcast production, copyright 2022. Thank you for listening.